I'm Jeff Reymar, and I'm going to be talking to you today about speech, handwriting, and East Asian typing features in the next version of Office. You might be wondering why these three topics are grouped together, and it turns out that they actually have a lot in common. Both speech and handwriting and East Asian typing as well all share some common user interface elements and are built on top of an API that essentially enables rich input into the Office applications and other applications on the user's system. The first of the common user interface elements that are shared among these three things is something called the language bar. The language bar is a new toolbar that allows you to control settings for input methods. Control whether speech recognition is on or off, whether handwriting is on or off, what sort of typing you're doing for an East Asian typing method, for instance. It's also the place where you switch keyboard languages, and more importantly, it's the place where you invoke the correction UI, which is an important new user interface that lets you correct mistakes made by these input methods, since unlike typing for Western languages, they tend not to be deterministic. Speech recognizers make mistakes. They essentially mishear you. Handwriting recognizers makes mistakes. They misrecognize what you've written. And similarly, East Asian typing methods make mistakes about guessing what sort of kanji, for instance, you intended when you typed a particular phonetic string. The goal of this correction interface is to enable you to quickly correct these sorts of mistakes and get back to the real task of typing your document. Here are some screenshots of these user interface elements. This is a picture at the top of the top right-hand portion of your screen while you're working in Word. At the very top of this, next to the button for minimizing Word, is the language bar. What you can see on this instance of the language bar is the button for correction, a button to turn on and off the microphone for speech recognition. Next to that is another button labeled Tools that lets you manipulate the settings for speech recognition. Next to that, after a separator bar, are the buttons for handwriting. In this case, one that controls the handwriting mode, and another one next to that that controls the drawing pad. Finally, on the toolbar are the buttons for help and to minimize and drop the options for the toolbar. This toolbar will appear in all of the Office applications and in other applications as well, depending on what language you're using and what sort of system you're on. Below that bitmap is a screenshot of the correction UI. So in this case, I've presumably handwritten or spoken, "This is a test." But test isn't actually the word I wanted. So I selected that word and pressed the correction button on the language bar to open the correction list. In this case, you can see that there are 9 alternatives presented: test with a capital T instead of a lowercase t, task, text, and so forth. There's also a scroll bar which lets me get at additional alternatives as well. This UI is essentially the same for speech, handwriting, and East Asian typing. There are other commonalities, though, besides the user interface. First of all, for speech, handwriting, East Asian typing, the best user experience provided by Office 10 will be in Word and WordMail. That's because Word and WordMail support a particular API that provides for the richest input, the best correction experience, the highest accuracy, the most flexibility, and the richest feature set in all of these input methods. All of the Office applications actually support input with speech, East Asian typing, and handwriting, but the applications other than Word use a sort of second-class input API instead of the rich one that Word uses. That API is provided by the Common Text Framework team, a group codenamed Cicero within Microsoft. They're in the Windows team, and they're providing the Common Text Framework API, which Word uses, as well as a translation layer that allows a different API to be used in the other Office applications. They're providing this to Office and to the Whistler team, essentially at the same time. So it's a common question to ask, why is speech being enabled in the next version of Office? Why didn't we do it before? Why aren't we waiting even longer to do it when the technology is more ready? Turns out there are a number of reasons that this was a good time to enable speech across Office 10. First, this is the first version where we're doing multimodal input in general: handwriting, richer East Asian typing, and speech. And the commonalities allowed us to do speech for a lower cost than it would have been incurred had we done it last time. Now is essentially the right time also because speech is really transitioning from the research laboratory to product groups. There's a new speech product group as of 2 years ago called the Speech Product Group, now speech.net, and they were building an API that we're using in Office 10 called the SAPI5 API, which is an industry standard API for speech recognition. In addition to being ready to transition from lab to product, now's a good time to incorporate speech into Office because it will give us the experience of shipping a speech product, which will allow us to refine the speech recognition experience in the next version of Office and in future product offerings from Microsoft as well. And finally, it's important to note that speech recognition is expensive. It requires a lot of CPU time. It's fairly memory intensive as well. And now we're at the point where the installed base of machines that are fast enough to support speech recognition is large enough to really justify the effort. In Office 10, we are starting small with regard to speech recognition. We're focused on 3 languages in particular: English, but not English around the world, particularly US English, Japanese, and simplified Chinese. Though these are the 3 languages that we're going to ship speech engines for in the Office boxes, we will support speech in other languages as well. That's because the SAPI API, the speech API provided by the Speech Product Group, will support engines for other languages besides these 3. So if an Office user in a European country, for instance, wants to use speech in Office 10, if they purchase a SAPI5 compatible speech engine, it will be usable within Office in essentially the same way as the US English, Japanese, and simplified Chinese engines are usable within Office, even though those engines are provided by Microsoft. There are essentially 3 speech technologies that Office ships. The first is dictation, and obviously this means speaking text and having that text appear in your document after it's been recognized by the speech engine. Second technology is voice commanding. Instead of dictating and getting text in your document, you'd use voice commanding to drive the application, to maybe save your document, to change formatting, things like that. Finally, text-to-speech is sort of the opposite of dictation. It takes text in your document and reads it aloud to you using a synthesized computer voice. We're using all 3 of these technologies with the goal in mind of improving productivity. That said, we don't believe dictation will improve productivity for everyone. In particular, in the US, it's targeted at people who are slow typists. Currently, dictation accuracy and the cost of correction are fairly slow, and correction is fairly expensive, and as a result, unless you're a relatively poor typist, dictation probably won't be faster for you. So there's no danger the keyboard's going to go away when we release Office 10. The situation's a little bit different in East Asia, where input method editors are used to enter text. And particularly for Japanese, the typing rate is much, much slower than in the US. So speech recognition for dictation actually offers the opportunity for many people to be able to input text faster than they would have with an input method editor. Command and control, we're primarily targeting at people who are good typists. The scenario here is, I'm a good typist, I want to keep my hands on the keyboard, but still be able to drive the application. I could certainly use shortcut keys to do this, or I could transition to using the mouse. But some people don't like remembering shortcut keys, and certainly it's difficult to remember all of the shortcut keys. And the cost associated with using the mouse is the time that you take to transition from keyboard to mouse and then back again. So we hope that for people who are good typists, they'll be able to say their commands aloud, keep their hands on the home row of the keyboard, and be more productive as a result. Finally, text-to-speech is being used in limited ways in Office. It's essentially a feature of Excel only, and the scenario here is for proofreading. A common Excel scenario is to have a hard copy document that you want to transcribe into Excel to do some manipulation. Maybe it's a financial accounting of a company, and you want to get the data from that hard copy that you have into Excel. The laborious process here is not only typing the data, but making sure that what you've typed is accurate, so that any modeling you do after the fact is accurate and jives with the data that comes from the hard copy document. So we'll use text-to-speech to read the text back to you after you've typed it, so that instead of transitioning from looking at the paper to looking at the screen to verify your data entry, you can simply keep your eyes on the paper and listen to what the computer reads aloud to you. When people think of speech recognition, they think of a number of really grandiose and lofty goals. Many of these things are things that we'd love to get to eventually, but that just aren't practical in the time frame of Office 10. A sampling of these are true hands-free operation of Office. You won't have the opportunity to do your knitting while creating your Word documents or sending your mail messages. There also isn't a focus on conversational interaction with Office. The way you use speech recognition won't involve talking to the office assistant, for instance. There's also no natural language commanding in Office. This is one of the buzzwords that you'll find on the backs of many third-party speech offerings. They'll claim that you'll be able to talk to your computer as if it were a person and give it commands and have those commands interpreted by some sort of natural language processing engine. That's not something we undertook in Office 10. There's also no focus on doing speech recognition over the telephone. You won't be able to call into your desktop or anything like that with Office 10. Finally, there's no integration with Office 10 and portable devices. No explicit integration with the Pocket PC, for instance. Before undertaking the work for Office 10, we did a number of usability tests, and we did these by bringing in people who were using third-party products from Dragon, Lernout and Houseby, and Philips, and other speech engine companies, and asking them a lot of questions about how they use the product, as well as observing them doing work with those products. We found a number of really useful things by doing this. First, we found that people's expectations about the products and the reality of those products differed wildly. In some cases, we found that people's expectations were so low that the fact that the computer was able to get any words right really pleased them. They, of course, weren't people who were using the products, but they were people who were delighted by the technology. A number of other people had essentially the opposite reaction. They felt that since computers were involved and since they'd seen things in science fiction movies, they felt that speech recognition and these speech rec packages would enable them to talk to their computer, to give it commands as if it were a human assistant, for instance. The reality is very much different. We also found that the throughput rate that could be achieved with these products was much lower than people would tolerate. It was hard to dictate text, though you could do it quickly, because you had to go back and correct the mistakes. And there were enough mistakes that the time invested in correcting each of them meant that typically people were unable to create documents faster with their voice than they were with typing. We also found that one of the biggest blockers to success with the products that were out when we were planning for Office 10 were things called mode errors. Most of the products for speech recognition claim to be modeless. They claim that you can dictate and give commands, and the computer will be able to tell which you intended to do. But the problem is, this isn't 100% accurate, and when a mistake is made, the mistake can be disastrous. On the bottom of this slide are two examples. Suppose I wanted to say, I love speech recognition in my document, and have the word love bolded. The way I might do this with a third-party speech product is to say, I bold, love, bold, speech recognition. Now, ideally, that would turn the word love into a word that was bolded. But we found that sometimes speech engines got confused about this and instead put the word bold, or maybe something that sounded like bold, into the document. Now the user has to go back and clean up the document. They have to remove the two instances of the word bold from the document, and after they've done that, they still don't have the formatting they want, so they have to apply that as well. This gets very time-consuming and can result in some sort of spiral of death scenario where you try and clean it up and you feel compelled to do it by voice, and you use voice to remove the word bold and get more text in your document and end up essentially being further with each attempt from your goal than you were before that attempt. The second example is I might want Alice in Wonderland was written by Lewis Carroll in my document, but the word Wonderland sounds a bit like the voice command underline. So I might, instead of getting Alice in Wonderland was written by Lewis Carroll, get Alice in was written by Lewis Carroll with an underline applied to it. And just like the first scenario where I said a command and it was interpreted as dictation, here I said some dictation and it was interpreted as a command. But similarly, I have to go back and do the cleanup. I have to remove formatting in this case, add the word that was missing. And this is time-consuming and tedious as well. So as a result of these usability tests, we came up with a design that was focused on solving the problems that the usability tests revealed. We felt that it was important to deeply integrate into Office. One of the problems we found in the usability tests was that people wanted to use Office, since that's where they create their documents, but the speech rec vendors had focused on enabling small text editing applications where they could control the feature set very carefully. So we want to deeply integrate into Office 10. We want to give you feedback about whether the microphone is on, feedback about whether the speech engine is processing your text, all in the document. We also want to let you be able to save the audio and the alternatives for a particular dictated phrase in the document so that you can come back and do correction later. We want to make correction as easy as possible. This was the thing that slowed people down dramatically when doing dictation. As a result, we've given users a shortcut menu. They can right-click on a dictated word or a handwritten word or a word entered with an IME and get alternatives for that word, just like they can right-click on a mistake that they made while typing that's a spelling mistake that has a red squiggle underneath it, and see spelling alternatives on the right-click menu. Similarly, we want to make the correction experience easy when what's on the right-click menu isn't the right thing. So we have a simple correction list, which I showed at the beginning, and that list is shared in terms of the design and the use with the handwriting, IME, and speech engines. We also found that because user expectations varied so widely, more than for other features within the new version of Office, we found that training was essential. We did tests that showed that people who saw a short training video or got a little bit of instruction from a usability engineer had a vastly better chance of being successful than people who were just given the product and given instructions about the product in the form of help. So we have a training video in Office, 2 to 3 minutes long. It explains the basics of dictation, manages people's expectations, and hopefully sets them on their way toward having a successful experience with dictation and voice commanding in the Office applications. Finally, Office 10 is modal. We aren't making claims about being able to tell when you're dictating from when you're voice commanding. As a result, though modes are typically bad, we've found that people are more successful with this modal implementation because mode errors are completely eliminated. I'll never have that scenario of having the word bold in my document when I said bold because I wanted to change the formatting of a word. The two modes that we have correspond to dictation and voice commanding. And in addition to these two modes, which are mutually exclusive, you can't do voice commanding in dictation and vice versa, we do have easy ways to switch between them. There's a shortcut key. You can do it by pressing a toolbar button on the language bar, and there's a voice command to switch modes as well. Within Office, the speech support ranges throughout the entire Office suite. There's dictation in all of the Office applications. It's best in Word and WordMail, but it's also present in Outlook, PowerPoint, Front Page, Excel, Access, Publisher, and even Internet Explorer as well, once you've installed Office on your machine. Voice commanding is present in all of the Office applications as well. Text-to-speech can only be found in the Excel application. In the future, we hope to get around to addressing a number of the non-goals for the Office 10 speech enabling. Hopefully we'll be able to make improvements based on feedback we get from users of Office 10. Machines will get faster. This is likely to yield increases in accuracy and therefore a better user experience, and maybe increase the number of people who are more successful with dictation than they are with typing. We also hope eventually to integrate some natural language processing and speech together to allow for more natural commanding scenarios. And eventually, speech rec over the telephone and on portable devices is something that Office will tackle, but not in the Office 10 timeframe. Moving on now to handwriting, many of the features are shared. We use the same API as speech recognition, the same toolbar, the same correction interface. Handwriting is something that you can do with a mouse, though in reality, you'll have the best experience with handwriting in Office if you have a tablet, something like a Wacom tablet, which allows you to write with a pen on something that essentially looks like a mouse pad. The handwriting work that we're doing in Office 10 is really part of the process of paving the way for the tablet PC. People are excited about this platform, and we do handwriting recognition in Office, just like will be done on the tablet PC and other devices in the future. Some of the shared user interface elements are there as well. It's important to point out that handwriting is a technology that in the past has had a bad reputation. The Newton came out and made grandiose claims about handwriting accuracy and ease of use, and it was essentially disastrous. People had a hard time getting their text recognized accurately. But I think you'll be pleased with the accuracy of the handwriting recognition in Office 10. The accuracy is very good for both cursive and print writing. Handwriting is supported for Office in 5 languages: English, Japanese, Korean, Simplified Chinese, and Traditional Chinese. In the past, we've had handwriting support in some Office applications, Word in particular. The handwriting in Office 10 vastly improves over the handwriting in Word 9, in particular because in Word 9, handwritten text was stored in Word documents as a Windows metafile. And technically, this forced a number of disadvantages on the implementation. The first was that since entire words were metafiles, you couldn't manipulate an image of handwriting anything lower than the word level. You couldn't, for instance, select a single character. And even if you could select a single character, you wouldn't be able to manipulate that character or the entire word as anything other than an image. There's no opportunity to make something bold, for instance. In Word, we have the richest support in Office for handwriting. Things like text when you write is automatically converted from ink, what you write in, your handwriting, to text if you want. If you'd like, it can remain as ink, so you can end up with what appear to be bitmaps of your handwriting in the Word document. If you choose to do that, within Word 10, we give you opportunities to apply formatting to that ink. You can bold your ink, you can italicize your ink, you can increase or decrease the font size of that ink as well. And even though the ink is stored as what will appear to the user as a bitmap, doing find and replace allows you to search for the text represented by that ink. So I can do some handwriting, leave it as ink, and then find instances of that handwritten text using the find dialog within Word. There are 3 different modes for handwriting in Office 10. To enter text or ink, I can use either the writing pad, which is a box that appears on the screen, and my handwriting must be entered within the confines of that box, or I can use Write Anywhere mode. In Write Anywhere mode, the entire screen is available for handwriting. I can write over top of the document window, the application, the toolbars, and things like that, and all of that writing will be recognized and inserted into my document. It's also possible with the handwriting tools to do sketching. There's something called Drawing Pad, which allows you to do free-form drawing or writing and have an image inserted into the document. No recognition will happen in this case. Whatever you draw or write will be inserted into Word verbatim. Here's a screenshot of the writing pad interface. You can see that I've handwritten the word test here. There's a baseline, the blue line above which I've written test, and you should align your writing with that baseline. On the right side of the screen, you can see that there are a number of buttons to control white space, inserting tabs, change modes, things like that, as well as to open the correction user interface and do some erasing. The support for handwriting in Office 10 does allow for some integration with the Pocket PC. So for instance, if you have a Pocket PC and take notes in either the Note Taker application or Pocket Word, it's possible to sync those notes with Word and Outlook and manipulate the notes that you took in Word as ink, convert them into text, leave them as ink, and so forth. Ink documents that you create in Word are also viewable on the Pocket PC, so you can go from the Pocket PC to Word as well as in the opposite direction. Correcting handwriting looks very much like correcting speech input and correcting IME input. The same correction UI is used, with one modification, namely that at the bottom of the correction window, you can see a bitmap of the handwriting that's being corrected. So in this case, you can see my sloppy writing of the word test at the bottom of the window. That hopefully will make it easy for you to recall what word you wanted and make it easier to select the right one. We'll move on now to talking about East Asian typing briefly. So for Office 10, we have new input method editors for Japanese, Korean, Simplified Chinese, and Traditional Chinese, the 4 languages that we've had input method editors for in the past. There are a number of common improvements to all 4 of the input method editors for these languages. First of all, you can type East Asian text in all of the Office applications on all platforms. This is different than in the past because it used to be in Office 9 that you either had to do your typing on an East Asian version of Windows or Windows 2000, or else you could only type in Word and Outlook. Now you can do your typing with Japanese IME on Windows 98 in Excel, for example, or any of the other Office applications. Another improvement is that all the input method editors share increased accuracy, something that's been focused on this time. The Japanese IME in particular has gotten a number of improvements. First of all, there are actually 2 input method editors for Japanese this time around. One is called Natural Input, and this is a radical departure from previous Japanese input method editors in that it focuses on allowing users to enter text with fewer keystrokes. Unlike typing in Western languages, Japanese typing and East Asian typing in general is done phonetically, and then there's a conversion process to kanji characters or other characters. And typically what happens is users enter some phonetic characters and then explicitly request that those characters be converted to the final representation. With natural input, the conversion happens automatically at particular times, saving the user keystrokes. Now, this is a radical departure from previous Japanese IMEs, so there is more to learn, but if users are willing to make the investment, they're likely to be faster at typing with natural input than with previous IMEs, and with what's called standard IME, which is the other version of the Japanese IME that ships with Office 10. This IME is very similar to the IME that shipped with Office 9, which is called IME 2000. So in conclusion, we have dictation and voice commanding across all of the Office applications, we have handwriting across all of the Office applications, and we have an improved East Asian typing experience across the Office applications as well. And in particular, that's available on all platforms. This is all possible because we're using one shared set of UI and some underlying common APIs. And as a result, we hope that the input experience will be better for users in most languages and independent of what sort of input method they're using, whether it's speech, handwriting, or typing. Thank you.